Premier Jason Kenney, Jason Nixon, Minister of Environment and Parks, Chief Peter Powder of the Mikisew Cree First Nation, and Rob Broen, President and CEO of Athabasca Oil Corporation. Premier Kenney, would you please begin?
Absolutely. Thanks very much. I'm here today to make an exciting and historic announcement: the creation of the largest contiguous protected boreal forest area in the world. For generations, Albertans have found beauty and pride in the stunning natural landscapes across our province. Alberta's sweeping prairies, the rolling foothills, the majestic mountain vistas have inspired countless works of art and have brought tourists here from all around the world. And Alberta's government has taken significant steps to make sure that these treasures are both celebrated and preserved. But it's often easy to forget that more than half of our entire province is covered by boreal forest. These lush green areas have provided homes and habitats for native species for generations, long before humans arrived on this land. And because of what we're announcing today, they'll continue to do so for generations to come. These forests are home to many species most closely associated with Alberta, like moose, bears, river otters, and of course the iconic wood bison, as well as traditional medicines gathered by Indigenous people for thousands of years. And because they sit atop the oil and gas resources that have driven our modern economy, both government and industry have made it a priority fully to restore these lands once work is completed. In short, these lands, particularly the boreal forest, are a part of who we are. And that's why today I am so happy and honored to announce that Alberta's government will expand the Kitsakino Nuunewe wildland in northeast Alberta to make it the largest contiguous area of boreal protected land in the world. KNW is located directly south of Wood Buffalo National Park and beside the Birch River and Richardson Wildland Provincial Parks. The expansion will add about 143,000 hectares of land. Just to put that in perspective, it's about 3 times the size of Waterton Lakes National Park. Now, during the 2019 election, I made a platform commitment to ensure that all major environmental protection proposals will be subject to a social economic impact assessment. And in keeping with this commitment, the proposed KNW wildlife expansion will be no exception. A socioeconomic impact assessment will be concluded before the expansion is finalized. The expanded protected area will support Indigenous peoples' traditional activities, including the exercise of treaty rights, and will further link together the surrounding parks, like the existing Kitsakino Nuunewe Wildlife Provincial Park and Wood Buffalo National Park. This will help protect the landscape, watersheds, and area wildlife. The expanded protected area will keep its wild, undeveloped character, but also allow for some responsible recreation activities, which Minister Nixon will highlight in a second. But we are here today as a result of remarkable collaboration between Alberta's government, Indigenous communities, and industry. Mikisew Cree First Nation has led the collaborative work on the potential expansion, and companies, namely Athabasca Oil Corporation and Cenovus, have agreed to surrender Crown mineral agreements in the area in order to make this expansion a reality. And I want to thank both of these great Alberta companies, particularly Rod, who's joining us here from Athabasca, for their incredible leadership. You'll hear from Chief Powder of the Mikisew Cree and these two companies in just a minute. This is a shining example of how valuable and important partnerships and collaboration are when it comes to land use and conservation planning. Albertans can provide feedback on the current plan through a public survey, which is available on alberta.ca until March 15th, and we'll also be doing consultation and engagement with Indigenous communities during that time. We look forward to the exciting work ahead to make this magnificent protected area a reality. And with that, I'll hand it over to, I believe, Minister Nixon.
Well, thank you for that, Premier Kenney. Today's announcement has been 2 years in the making. In 2019, the Kataskaino-Nuinea wildland was established, which resulted from an historic agreement between Indigenous communities, industry, and government to conserve an incredible landscape in the province's northeast. For the past 2 years, Mikisew Cree First Nations has led discussions on a potential expansion of the wildland so that we can continue to connect this critical landscape to other wildland provincial parks and enhance this incredible area of our province. As Premier Kenney mentioned, most people think of mountains and prairies when they think of Alberta. However, the Boreal region within our province's north half is vast and remarkably important. The area, also home to Alberta's bitumen reserves, is home to a wealth of plant and animal species not seen anywhere else in our province. The region's wetlands and forests also serve as the lungs of the province, and its waterways connect with a continental network of others, making its preservation critical. Perhaps most importantly, most of the region also overlaps with the Red Earth Caribou Range, making it key to maintaining that threatened species, which is amazing in and of itself, but also creates certainty for industries like oil and gas and forestry elsewhere in our province. As Premier Kenney mentioned, the area also plays host to wood bison, one of the province's most iconic species. The Kataskaino-Nuinea wildland is intended to support traditional activities such as medicine harvesting, hunting, and trapping for First Nations and Métis Albertans. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mikisew Cree First Nation for their leadership in this collaborative work and their efforts to get us to where we are today. Right now, the expansion area is considered mixed use, which means that it is a mixture of industrial activity, which is allowed currently. However, there isn't a large amount of development in that area today. As Premier Kenney mentioned, some corporations have agreed to voluntarily surrender Crown mineral agreements in order to make this expansion possible. Athabasca Oil Corporation has agreed to voluntarily surrender about 23,500 acres of Crown mineral agreements, and Cenovus has voluntarily surrendered more than 60,000 acres. This is a great example of how we can achieve positive outcomes when we work together. Alberta's government has also committed to increasing outdoor recreational opportunities for Albertans, including backcountry activities. Through the enhancement of chances to hike, ski, hunt, and fish, the Kataskaino-Nuinea wildland will provide Albertans with even more incredible landscapes in which to enjoy our great province. We are pleased to be able to come to the table with Indigenous communities, industry, and Albertans to protect our boreal ecosystem. Thank you, and I'd like to just take a moment before I pass the mic over to Chief Peter Powder of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. I'd like to quickly acknowledge former Mikisew Chief Archie Walkwin, who was the first person who brought this to me and I know has worked tirelessly on behalf of his nation to get us this far. I'd like to congratulate him on today and thank Chief Powder for continuing his fantastic work and the fantastic work of so many elders and community members in the Mikisew community. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Powder to say a few words.
The Chief is muted.
Chief, can you unmute your microphone?
Should we maybe go to Rod and then the Chief can fix out the...
Yeah, let's turn it over to Rod at Athabasca Oil Corp, and we'll see if we can get our technical issues sorted out here.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Oh, we've got...
Okay,
yep, we can...
Sorry about that. Sorry, good afternoon, and thank you, Premier and Minister Nixon. And today is a proud and exciting day for our community because of an important part of our vision of our lands is moving closer to becoming a reality. And it's moving forward in the right way with a spirit of partnership and collaboration that spans the multiple sectors of the Alberta economy. Introduce myself, Chief of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. For those of you who don't know where Mikisew is, we're located in Fort Chipewyan. Our lands include the Peace Athabasca Delta and much of the oil sands region. A few years ago, we started the process with our elders and land users to hear their vision and most important, most urgent areas of our territory needing protection. The message came back clear. We need to protect the watersheds that flow into Lake Claire of the Wood Buffalo National Park. We needed to protect the caribou and the wood bison habitat that is adjacent to the park. And we needed to keep the boreal forest south of the park intact. Out of that process, the idea of Kitaskino, Nwinene Wildlife Park was born. From that history, you can see why the Kitaskino Nwinene Wildlife Park area matters to us. It is an area that was important headwaters that support one of our most important places, the Peace Athabasca Delta, an area that supports traditional resources that sustain us. It's important, it's our culture, it's our way of life. But the importance goes beyond just us. It matters to all Albertans. The expansion will protect significant new amounts of habitat for some of Alberta's most iconic and threatened species, including more than 1,000 hectares of boreal caribou range. It helps the watersheds that support the Wood Buffalo National World Heritage Site are protected, and it adds more areas to Alberta Park System. A good indicator of the importance of this area is just how many partners have come together to make today's announcement possible. We're here today on the verge of protecting 150,000 hectares of important ecological and cultural areas because of our vision has been supported by so many, including leading forestry and energy companies like Athabasca Oil, Cenovus, Imperial, Teck, Suncor, Northlands, and Alpac. It's worth repeating, every single company that had interest in this area has helped us move forward, and all of our Indigenous. I'd like to close by thanking all those supporters once again. I'd also like to thank the federal government because of their financial support that we received from the Nature Fund that was very instrumental. And of course, I'd like to thank you, Minister Nixon and Premier Kenney. You both took our vision seriously. You encouraged us to build partnerships and to ensure that our vision had to support important economic sectors out in the province, and we achieved that goal today. I encourage all Albertans to support this initiative. So thank you all.
Thanks very much, Chief.
Thank you, Chief Powder. If now we can go over to Rob Broen at Athabasca Oil Corporation.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Premier Kenney and Minister Nixon and Chief Powder for inviting Athabasca Oil to participate in today's announcement. Athabasca Oil is proud to play a part in the expansion of the Kitaskino Nwinene Wildland Provincial Park. We understand the importance of protecting the environment and supporting Indigenous culture, and we believe that expanding the park will preserve this critical area for the future benefit of all Albertans. The park will protect a significant area of pristine, largely unfragmented land with high biodiversity potential, while also supporting Indigenous rights and cultures. Our ability to bring this park expansion to reality is a direct result of a strong collaboration between all parties, and we thank everyone involved. The Mikisew Cree First Nation provided the vision and the inspiration to conserve this key area, while the Government of Alberta has shown ongoing support of their efforts. Oil and gas industry participants recognized the ecological and cultural significance of the area and came to the table with contributions of significant leased land holdings. Athabasca Oil is pleased to have played a key role in this by contributing actually approximately 95,000 hectares, or approximately 2/3 of the land needed to expand this park. Together, we have made a difference. We have helped protect an important part of Alberta's natural beauty and ecological infrastructure for future generations, while also providing opportunities to support Indigenous culture. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Now we will be opening the lines for questions. To get to as many as possible today, we just ask that you limit yourself to one question. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Thank you. The first caller is Tom Vernon, Global News. Please go ahead.
Hi, I think my question is for the Premier. Thanks for taking my question today. It's about the eco-justice challenge to the Alberta inquiry. They're in front of a judge today saying that the inquiry is unlawful. It was brought forward to harm environmental organizations, that it is biased, and it's actually looking at things outside of provincial jurisdiction. What's your response to these charges, and do you believe that your inquiry can stand up to these charges?
Response is that Albertans told us in the last election to put a spotlight on the foreign-funded campaign to landlock Alberta's energy, which has cost tens of thousands of jobs and untold economic adversity in this province. Organizations that have taken millions, perhaps tens of millions of foreign dollars to kill the Northern Gateway pipeline, kill Energy East, trying to kill Trans Mountain, Keystone XL, Line 5, Line 9. These are organizations that have been deliberately attacking the lifeblood of Alberta's economy, the largest industry, the largest employer, and we have every right to seek transparency on what's going on. We ran on that. The commitment we made was to have a public inquiry into the campaign to landlock Alberta Energy, and we've kept that commitment.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Amanda Stevenson, Calgary Herald.
Hi, Premier. I have a question for you regarding the vaccine program. We heard the news today that the Manitoba government has committed to ordering 2 million doses of COVID vaccine from a Calgary-based company, Providence Therapeutics. I'm wondering if you can tell me if Alberta has plans to order its own vaccine supply independent of Ottawa, as Manitoba is doing, and if so, has Manitoba beat us to the punch here in ordering from a Made in Alberta solution?
Well, actually, I spoke to Premier Palliser about this last week and several premiers. I've spoken to the president of Providence Therapeutics, and we're exploring how we can make their vision a reality of producing those vaccines here in Canada so that we could access them. And I've reached out to my fellow premiers to establish a interprovincial task force on domestic vaccine supply. The president of Providence Therapeutics tells me that they would only be able to establish a domestic production facility in Canada if they got orders for 50 million doses. That's 50 million doses. And so this would require, an order of that scale would obviously require cooperation across the country. Neither Manitoba alone with 2 million or Alberta with a few million more would have an adequate market to satisfy the minimum requirements that Providence has expressed to establish domestic production here. And of course, we need domestic production. So the bottom line is we are absolutely open to, more than open, we are pursuing domestic production and potential supply because we apparently cannot count reliably on the federal program to procure vaccine doses from around the world, which is why we've been in discussions with Providence. There's another company in Alberta that is at phase 1 trials and a couple of other projects in Canada that have some potential as well. So we're well into doing our due diligence on this. And as I say, we've been leading the way and cooperating with other provinces. But a small order by ourselves would not be adequate to secure domestic production should Providence get to phase 3 trials and Health Canada approval.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Chris Epp, CTV Calgary.
Thank you. Premier, what's your position on loosening restrictions on a regional basis? We've heard calls from Medicine Hat and a few other areas where cases are very small, and people are saying, why do this blanket approach where everyone is paying the same price when some places COVID just is not having the same devastating effect as it is elsewhere?
Sure. We've always said that we are open to taking COVID policy on a regional basis. And in fact, we have at various points throughout the pandemic done just that. The problem is this, that the level of spread across the province since October was so high that we could not responsibly have a different approach in different regions. And in fact, right now, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen the rate of transmission, the positivity rate, hospitalizations, and new cases growing in the south, central, and northern zones, but going down in Edmonton and Calgary. Our threshold, just to be clear, based on the expert scientific advice we get from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hinshaw, our threshold to go to a regional approach is to have 50 cases or fewer per 100,000 people in a health zone. Well, the closest we get to that would be in the south zone at just over 100 cases per 100,000. So we're not close enough to that level of that lower level of spread to take a faster approach to relaxation at this point in any region. Look, I get the frustration that people have. There are people out there who may live in communities, perhaps some rural communities, where there are no cases. But folks need to understand that transmission can happen very fast, and we have to look at the broader trends, yes, in the regions, but also the whole province. There is I think, a misunderstanding in some quarters that rural Alberta is largely immune from the pandemic because of less population density, but our numbers just say that isn't so. In fact, of our the top 15 local geographic areas in terms of active COVID cases, 13 of those 15 are in rural communities. Only 2 are. One is in Edmonton, one's in Calgary. 13 are in rural communities. We've seen devastating outbreaks in long-term care and nursing homes throughout rural Alberta. And other parts of rural Canada. So there's no region that is immune to this. In fact, right now, we have more folks in hospital with COVID-19 in the South Zone than we've had since the beginning of the pandemic a year ago. So my message to people in every part of the province is simply this: let's continue to do our best to bend down the curve. We've made huge progress over the past 10 weeks or so. If we continue in the right direction, then hopefully some regions will be able to advance faster in opening up on the restrictions that exist. I guess actually one last point about putting the restrictions in context. Sometimes I hear people talk about a lockdown. There is no lockdown in Alberta. There never was. Over 99% of businesses in Alberta are able to operate right now within our safe public health guidelines. That, I know, is no small comfort to the less than 1% who have been closed due to public health restrictions, and we're going to increase financial support for them. But unlike other provinces, we've never had a stay-at-home order. We've never had a curfew. Other provinces still have shut down their schools. We reopened ours for 720,000 students, teachers, and staff on January the 6th. Many other provinces have padlocked places of worship, not here in Alberta, where we respect freedom of religion and freedom of worship. So we are taking a balanced approach, and we are happy to take a regional approach when the numbers make it safe to do so.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Vincent McDermott, Fort McMurray Today.
Hi, my question is for the Premier. As of noon today, EMS calls in Fort McMurray are not being sent to the AHS dispatch system. Mayor Don Scott has openly dared you to stop him, and one of your MLAs has endorsed council's defiance of AHS. What is your response to all this? And after what we saw with the coal policy, is a similar reversal possible?
So the decision to centralize AHS dispatch for emergency services has been the basis of multiple expert panels over several years, and it's been done for 90% of the province. So this is affecting, I think, 5 municipalities. The provincial central dispatch has worked extremely well for well over 95% of the province's municipalities. So this is just a natural step forward. And Minister Chandra, the Minister of Health, will be addressing that. I believe he's trying to discuss this with Mayor Scott and the municipality of Wood Buffalo today. And I hope they can find a sensible resolution. But we're absolutely committed to this change. We think it's the best thing in terms of service as well as efficiency. It served the province well, and it should serve all municipalities well. But let me just add that I hope you guys also up there in Fort McMurray and Wood Buffalo cover today's announcement, because it is historic for your region. The creation of the KNW Boreal Forest protected area creates the largest boreal forest contiguous protected area on the face of the earth. It is a huge deal, not just for First Nations, but for everybody who recreates up in the Wood Buffalo region. And we hope that doesn't get lost with other stories that are happening right now, because it's a big deal. It's an historic day.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Alicia Covella, Post Media.
Oh, good afternoon, Premier, and congratulations on the park. I'm actually asking about Providence Therapeutics, and I know Amanda's already asked a question about that, but I need a bit more clarity, because firstly, we're always talking about diversifying Alberta's economy from, oil and gas to having sort of more vibrant other things going on. And so why wouldn't the Alberta government back Providence to ramp up production of its mRNA vaccine and also procure some of these vaccines for Albertans so that we can, build up this biomedical industry right here in Alberta? And my understanding is that they've also produced a vaccine for the South African variant. So this is a very nimble company. It's a lot more nimble than some of the other things that the federal government is backing. And so I'd like to know what the Alberta government is doing specifically to help this company out and this industry, and whether or not we are in fact going to be ordering some vaccines from them.
Thanks for the great question, Alicia. I totally agree with the premise that it would be so important for us to have a domestic pharmaceutical industry here, and we are very keen on doing whatever we can to make that happen. It's obvious that we can't count on international vaccine supply during COVID-19, given the vaccine nationalism and the failure of the federal government to get strong enough contracts to access supply. And it's very possible that domestic producers won't be able to come on stream in the Canadian market before we do get adequately supplied from abroad. But I don't see that as a problem, because there is a global market of over 8 billion people. I believe that if we could get vaccine production going here, even if it wasn't until 2022, we could resell surplus doses on the international market. And as you point out, Leisha, we're going to need the nimbleness to modify vaccines to apply to the variants of concern, including the South African variant, which apparently the AstraZeneca vaccine is not effective in protecting from. So, Leisha, to answer your question, we've reached out to Providence Therapeutics in Calgary. I spoke to the president a couple of weeks ago and said, what can we do to help you make this happen? And he said to me very clearly that what they need is a $150 million order representing 50 million doses. And I said, well, count us as being very interested. We consulted with experts in the area of pharmaceuticals, and they've said to us, look, setting up large-scale vaccine production is a hugely complicated endeavor. I would refer you on that, Alicia, to Diane Francis's column in the National Post last week, in which she interviewed Leslie Dan, the founder of Novapharm, who is probably the top pharmaceutical expert in Canada. I also called Dr. Dan, he's a friend of mine, just to see what he thought was the path forward for domestic vaccine production. He was frankly pessimistic about it. He says it takes at least 2 years. You need a feasibility study. So we are working with Providence to see their feasibility study. I have reached out to all of the Canadian premiers to invite them into an interprovincial task force on assessing possible domestic supply and development of vaccines. There's not just Alberta, and it's not just Providence and Calgary. There's a project in Edmonton that is in their phase 1 trials. There is a project at the University of Saskatchewan, and there are at least 2 or 3 other projects across the country. So I've invited premiers to work with us in a working group to assess all of those to see where is our best shot at getting fast, reliable domestic supply. But as you can imagine, you don't just snap your fingers and write a $150 million check. That's not what Providence is looking for. They're looking for orders, and we would need to know that the project can be accomplished in good time, so we could actually get the supply. So bottom line, Leisha, I totally agree with what you're suggesting, and we are pursuing that. We've set up that task force. We're analyzing the feasibility of that, the Providence project, the Edmonton project, and others. And I've said to my fellow premiers, I raised this on the Council of the Federation call a week or 2 ago, that we've got to do this together. We've got to come together and join forces, join our purchasing power, because Alberta alone, I mean, we don't need 50 million doses. So we'll do whatever we can, whatever it takes to get this done, but we need to do our homework, make sure it's technically feasible, and I am absolutely prepared, having said all of that, Leisha, to invest in this sort of thing. We just need to make sure that we pick the right projects and that they are feasible.
All right, we have time for 3 more questions. Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Bob Weber, Canadian Press.
Hi. With regard to today's announcement, it's not clear to me what's being actually announced today. Is this the announcement of an actual new park recognized in legislation that actually exists on a map, or are we announcing a process to begin creating a park? And secondly, I'd like to know how
And Alberta and other provinces, I know, are not satisfied with the assurances we've been given by the Government of Canada. And so we are working together on a Plan B to see if we can set up our own domestic supply that we would order from as soon as possible. Now, there are a lot of views about what that might mean as soon as possible. A couple of companies say that they believe they could get through phase 3, get Health Canada approval, and start producing by September. Other experts say that's unrealistic. It wouldn't be at earliest until sometime next year. All I know is this. We shouldn't take any chances. We need a belt and suspenders, an all-of-the-above approach. We need to keep putting pressure on the federal government to, in turn, put pressure on the international suppliers, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Moderna, and we'll continue to do that. But we should also plan for the worst. So we should hope for the best and plan for the worst. The best would be that those big international pharma companies start ramping up production and overcome the vaccine nationalism in Europe and the US and get us the doses that Canada bought. But we have to plan for the worst, which is that vaccine nationalism carries on, that the EU actually does ban exports until their population's inoculated. And the US continues to grab doses coming off the lines in their pharma plants. So in that bad case scenario, we need a backup. And the backup would be domestic production. And we in Alberta, in principle, are prepared to put our the power of the public purse and our purchasing power behind that. So best case scenario in terms of domestic production would be later this year. And my point is, let's say we made a big order for domestic production and we end up getting flooded with doses from foreign producers on time. Well, I call that a good problem to have. And in that case, I don't think the domestic production would go to waste. I think we could produce here and sell around the world. And we could also have, as Alicia points out, the ability, in principle, to modify vaccines in the future to address new variants of concern. You know, part of the problem with vaccine nationalism that we've been seeing in Europe and the US is that it might start from dose number 1 on modified vaccines developed to address new variants, if you follow. So that's my concern. Right now, we've got international supply constraints because of what's happening in the politics around the world. What happens if one of these variants becomes the normative variant around the world, and they got to go back to the starting point at Pfizer, Moderna, Oxford, AstraZeneca to come up with their vaccines 2.0? Will that vaccine 2.0 be subject to export limits and vaccine nationalism? So in that worst case scenario, let's say we don't get that international supply until the end of this year, until sometime in 21. I think it's in principle worth us trying, you know, provinces working together to develop that domestic production, and that's what we're looking at.
Operator, can you please put through our last caller?
Thank you. Audrey Neveau, Radio Canada.
Hi, Premier. I have a question for you in English and in French today. I want to know, when are we going to see the plan for the second phase of vaccination in Alberta? Et en français, je voudrais résumer un peu le sujet des vaccins. Dites-moi où en est le gouvernement albertais dans ses discussions avec Providence pour obtenir ces vaccins faits au Canada, et qu'est-ce que ça prendrait pour les convaincre de les fabriquer ici en Alberta?
So first of all, the Cabinet Committee on COVID just considered last week a proposal from the Department of Health on the priority groups as we roll out the COVID-19 vaccines to the general population, and we'll be releasing that in due course. We want to make sure that we get it right. We're also checking in with other provinces to see how they're planning on rolling it out. But the key thing is we just need more supply right now. As you know, we're ready to pull this trigger to start the vaccination of everyone in Alberta over the age of 75 and everyone in their Indigenous population over the age of 65, given that they face worse health outcomes from COVID-19. So that's our key next priority group, and then we would move down by age cohort. We'll want to get to everybody over the age of 65, and obviously people with chronic conditions that can make them vulnerable. And then where we go after that is still subject to, we're going to finalize that issue. But frankly, we won't be reaching those larger groups within the population for some time, given the slowness of vaccine supply. My main focus right now on vaccines is just making sure that if we suddenly get a flood, like at the end of March, as we might, that we're in a position to deliver as many jobs as we can, as quickly as possible. And you asked in French about that and the Providence program in Calgary. Notre but maintenant, c'est de faire les vaccinations pour tous les Albertains qui sont plus de 75 ans et toutes les Albertaines autochtones de plus de 65 ans. Et après ça, évidemment, les gens de plus de 65 ans et dans la population générale et tous les Albertains avec les conditions chroniques qui est une menace en ce qui concerne le COVID-19. Alors, ça, c'est les prochaines étapes, mais on va continuer avec les consultations et prendre les décisions en ce qui concerne la population générale. Mais maintenant, notre focus est sur l'administration le plus vite que possible des vaccins et évidemment d'obtenir plus des doses. À cet égard, on a commencé les pourparlers avec la compagnie Providence Therapeutics à Calgary et avec les autres producteurs potentiels des vaccins de COVID-19 en Alberta et au Canada, avec les autres provinces pour voir s'il y a les programmes s'il y a des programmes de vaccins qui vont marcher. Et je suis prête, en principe, d'appuyer avec le pouvoir d'achat de l'Alberta certains programmes, comme potentiellement celle de Providence Therapeutics. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.